Hi everyone, today my partner Ashlyn and I will be talking about the Supreme Court case Santa Fe Independent School District versus Doe, which focuses on prayer in public schools and how it relates to the First Amendment. So for some context, this case began at Santa Fe High School in Santa Fe, Texas, where the school district allowed students to lead prayers that would be delivered over the loudspeaker before home football games. For reference, these are the same loudspeakers that many of us may have heard our names being called on during senior nights, or may have heard music being played from during halftime shows. So these are some loudspeakers that can't necessarily be ignored. The prayers prayed through these loudspeakers were often Christian in nature, and while participation was not required, I want us to all think back to how impressionable we were in high school and how we might feel if everyone around us was participating in the same prayer while our school blasted over an intercom. At this point, I would also like to mention that the families in this case went by the name John Doe to protect their identities because they faced some serious backlash from their local community. Many people in the town disagreed with their lawsuit, and they received harassment and threats for challenging a long-standing religious tradition that was being held at the school. But keep in mind that these prayers took place at school-sponsored events, on school property, and even used school equipment. The two families in this case, one Mormon and one Catholic, filed a lawsuit claiming that these prayers violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, which prevents the government from endorsing or promoting religion. The school district argued back, saying that the prayers were student-initiated and completely voluntary, and therefore they didn't represent government speech. But this led to the main legal questions. Does student-led prayer at public school football games violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment? Or, in other words, can a public school allow students to lead prayers over the loudspeaker at school events without it being seen as government endorsement of religion? Well, in 2000, the Supreme Court's decision came out as a 6-3 ruling against the Santa Fe Independent School District. The court decided that the policy allowing student-led prayer was completely unconstitutional. They reasoned that because the prayers took place during a school-sponsored event, was using school resources, and was under school supervision. It just gave the impression that the school itself was supporting religion. The court also emphasized that even if participation was voluntary, students attending football games might still feel the social pressure to join in, which makes it an indirect form of coercion. Overall, this ruling reinforced the idea that public schools must remain neutral when it comes to religion, ensuring that no student feels excluded or pressured just because of their beliefs.
The Supreme Court's holding is that student-led, student-initiated prayer at public school football games is not permissible because it violates the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, specifically the freedom of religion. But there were three justices who dissented. They disagreed with the ruling. That would be Chief Justice Rehnquist, Scalia, and Thomas. They argue that the majority opinion demonstrated hostility to all things religious in public life. These justices, they maintain that voluntary student prayer should be constitutionally protected, emphasizing that the practice reflected students' private expression rather than government endorsements. But this case is still really significant for education today, especially for administrators creating policies to respect both freedom of religion but also freedom from government-imposed religious influence. It's also important for protecting the rights of religious minorities, but still maintaining that clear separation between church and state within educational settings.